incredible, Ron. It is incredible.
Yeah. Amazing.
Very good job, Dominic. This will be the beginning of breathing life back into our first people's footprints that walked this nation, that created the highways. It'll breathe life back into the awareness of why our people did that. They walked to care for the country, and this will just be the beginning of starting that journey again. And we hope that whomever comes to experience this, that they will tread softly and follow the wisdom of our ancient people's footprints.
We both feel this is about ecological and cultural restoration, bringing the two together, learning from the traditional owners, learning about the wisdom in which they used science to manage the landscape. And if we could learn from the traditional owners in this way, I feel that we would do a lot better job of managing these natural systems that are so precious, that have evolved through deep time.
This artwork has come about through the efforts of many people who've got a compassion for the environment, a passion of telling the story of the environment, and a passion for telling the story of how we care for country. And we can see those stories emanating through here, through the artwork of the flora and fauna. And from our Noongar perspective, a lot of that is about our totemic system, where families had responsibilities, groups had responsibilities through the totemic system of caring for the animals and the plants. My totemic animal is a little yuri bird, we call it. It's the western spinebill. And that has got the spirit of our old people, and it guides us in our, and just today I think I heard it calling and I thought, yeah, it's a blessing. And my plant totem is the talyarak tree, and that helps us to understand our country and our tribal run. When we can no longer see those plants, we're into somebody else's property, and it's not our responsibility. Our responsibility is to care for the plants in our country. And you'll see our Noongar artwork here that interprets their vision of our landscape. Some of it's in symbols, some of it's in footprints. Our Noongar artwork has always been about painting the landscape to give our younger ones an understanding of connection to country, and about teaching them about to identify with where they belong. It's all about a sense of belonging. When you belong to somewhere, you care for it. You've got that commitment, you've got that dedication to care for it. And so all of this will be an educational site. It'll be about caring for country from a Noongar perspective that shows our connection to the flora and fauna, but also about the ecological, scientific Western science, and bringing those two sciences together to care for country. And we hope that this model will be replicated all around Australia. And so rather than tracing Captain Cook's journey, this is about tracing our First Nations footprints all around Australia. And we've got those maps to show where those regional biddies, those regional walk trails interconnect all through the nation. And so this will be a a walk trail, artwork trail that'll go all around Australia. So we hope this site will be the first of a national network that honours our First Nations footprints around Australia. And in front of us, we talk about caring for country, but straight in front of us there's an image of what we call the Sleeping Beauty. But for this purpose, we see her as iconic of Mother Earth, and she lays there reminding us to care for country. That is Mother Earth, or in our Noongar name, we call her Kayang, a wise old lady, and she will always guide us. Her spirits and the spirits of our ancient people will guide us in caring for country. What we've got here, courtesy of Dr. Noel Nannup, who went to the effort about 20, 30 years ago to listen to the old people and capture their stories of their walk trails, the original walk trails, or biddies as we call them. And what I want to do is to show you where those walk trails are, and also to show you that the highways now were originally our old people's walkways. You see these thick black line here, which is now the Great Southern Highway to Esperance. That was once a walk trail. Goes right down to Walpole. Another one branches off that goes to Denmark, or Wave Rock there. You can see all these black lines. They were the walk trails. Southwest Highway. This is the Franklin River Highway. All these little black lines were walk trails. And this one here is I've yet to add, because that was how our people walked from Esperance, or the women walked from Esperance to Albany when the men were in jail. Look at this one. The connection. Way over there. People had connection. The way I'm looking at it, we've actually come a full circle. You know, this landscape, this country was taken care of by our Noongar people for 70,000 years or more, or as we say, since time immemorial. The walk trails, the water, the honouring of the hills, the honouring of the plants and animals. That was our responsibility.
Yeah, that's all you need to do.
And then
That should be fairly fast then.
the government changes, the government made demands on people. There was, you know, the huge tracts of development of the land that literally scathed the landscape and tore down trees, tore the ground, destroyed it, destroyed the natural habitats, introduced new noxious weeds, and literally just scathed the landscape. And it was heartbreaking to see that. It was heartbreaking to see the animals running to escape from all that development. And because they were our totems, our spiritual connection to the country was our religion that was just being destroyed in front of our eyes. And there was nothing we could do about it, because us Noongar people at that time were considered pests along with the wild animals that were destroying sheep. And so we just couldn't help it. You know, we went through a huge stage of cultural grief that probably is still in the process of healing now. And when I look at the work that's been done through Gondwana Link, Bush Heritage, Green Skills, funded by the government, funded by donors, people who have a passion to restore the land to what it was, people who are learning how to us Noongar people take the care of the land. And so they're replicating some of our practices. So we have the combined effort of Western science with old science, And that's where we are now. We've come back in a full circle where culture and caring for country is integral to our plans for this whole, from Norseman right through the Margaret River, through the Gondwana link, and the multitude of agencies and people with a passion to care for the environment. We're all working together. And this is where race doesn't become an issue. The issue is caring for country. The issue is protecting our environment. The issue is salvaging something for our future generations. We don't own the land. We are only custodians. We can't take it with us when we leave this life. And so we need to give it back and make sure it's there for our future generations to care for. And we see the people that are working here today, everybody working hand in hand with the one passion, and that was to establish a story, or the beginning of a story, of how our Noongar people were the first footprints on this land. And that's what we've achieved. We're very proud to say we've achieved it. And we know it will be cared for.
Where we're sitting at the moment is a farming property that never really got off the ground, and we chose a site here even before the artwork that would be ideal for people to get a bit of an overall view of this district. We got two mountain ranges, the Stirling Range to the north and the Prongerup to the south, and it's quite a significant transitional area here as well as far as rainfall, i.e. the climate and vegetation, geology. We've always called it a bit of a transitional area for a lot of species. When you've got geology and climate doing its thing, so you also have plants and animals coming together at this point. So it's quite a significant spot where we are here. And I think this artwork probably helps to highlight that, which is quite good. What's happened in this area is there's a group called Rangers Link, which is moving in the same direction as what we need to be doing from a conservation point of view of species that were quite common in the area, which now have become quite scarce. But hopefully we're pulling all that together with a lot of the revegetation work we're doing for trying to hold on to the biodiversity which evolved in this area over tens of thousands of years. And I think this type of artwork sort of highlights the thinking and bringing together all the aspects of nature and the evolutionary processes that's brought us to this point. The history is extremely long, longer than we can imagine, but here we are, the culmination of all those events over a very long period of time, and hopefully this art installation helps people sort of grasp some sort of the concept, I guess, of how this has all come about. We hope that this type of installation will sort of will open a few eyes for people who would normally just drive past and probably just see, more farms or more bits of bush, but to actually pull in and have time to sit down and look at the artwork, try and get some grasp of that, and look around them at the mountains and the bushland or whatever's flowering around them, or the sounds they hear around them at that one point in time, and not just going to another tourist spot where things can be fairly contrived as well, just to suit what the tourists like to do. This is a little bit educational, and that's was probably very educational for a lot of people. But I think it may be the catalyst for people having some sort of an understanding of nature here in Australia, which is quite different to Europe or North America. or UK or wherever a lot of people have come from. Australia's a little bit upside down or back to front compared to those parts of the world, and this can highlight it. Yeah, I think I get a feeling that the general population miss out on a lot, and driving around the countryside, they think they've been bush. Well, they've been out in the countryside, but most people don't really go bush. It's only enthusiasts that end up actually going in the bush in most cases. And what a lot of people are seeing when they go into the country is a lot of introduced or exotic species. Foxes, cats and rabbits and sheep. That's not what Australia was. The hidden Australia is what's the bits that are left in the bush, or the bits of bush that are left, and we have a lot of feeling for all those species which a lot of are in decline. And if we can make people aware of a lot of these species, we would sort of be having an effect, and a positive effect, I think, and then maybe people are more likely to want to care for the wild areas, because at the moment I see people caring more about exotic species in Australia, like the honeybee, which it's an exotic species. People get so emotional about the honeybee, for example. And there are other exotic species that are more likely to be emotionally upset about their fate than they are of hundreds of small native species that they don't, in many cases, people don't even know they exist. If you live in the country, you can't help but have an affiliation with it, regardless of who you are. But for me, I try my best to understand how the ecology of the area works and what was there, and I try and educate myself on species and whether they're in decline or whether they are out of control, breeding out of control, and looking at how we can sort of balance all that, because when agriculture came to this country, it changed everything. You can't deny that. It changed absolutely everything. And people around the world don't understand that we can have far too many kangaroos in the environment, for example. And this is a consequence of creating an environment. The farming environment actually encourages the breeding of the grey kangaroo, and so they're in massive numbers in some areas, and people get upset if they have to be culled. Well, this is just a consequence of the human population expanding and want to feed greater numbers of humans. So we've had that effect. But other species, there's more than one type of kangaroo, and so other species it doesn't suit them to have that vast areas of cleared land and pasture, and so they are likely to become extinct, especially if you add all the introduced predators like foxes and dogs and cats and the like. And we have to look at ways of how we can balance that or ameliorate that problem. And through regeneration projects, we've created more habitat for some of those more vulnerable species. And driving around the area, it's actually encouraging to see how well some of that revegetation work is going. And we keep pushing that, because it's quite important, not only for the animals, but it's actually keeps the even farmland more healthy. It keeps the creeks a little bit more fresh and the water a bit cleaner going down into the harbour, into Oyster Harbour. So that's all positive stuff, and we know we can have a positive effect if we all, make an effort.
My name's Ben Beaton. I make art on the ecology, geology and deep time history of natural systems. For many years I'd been creating artist residency projects for myself, working with ecotourism organisations. After my work in Central Australia, I wanted to follow one of the big shapes in Australia, so I set myself the task of following the Lewin Current. I started up in the Kimberley and worked my way down, doing many artist residency projects. one of the themes that occurred again and again through these residencies was that so many species were in decline, so many natural systems had been damaged. Eventually I got to Albany, Gondwana Link, and met Keith Bradbury. Well, Keith was talking about ecological and cultural restoration, and I'd never heard things framed in that way before. I met Nathan McCoy, the ecologist at the Fitzgerald, and he was talking about connectivity and environmental and cultural connectivity, and I'd never heard things talked about in that kind of way before. And then I met Professor Steve Hopper. He told me about the Ockbills and the Yodfells, these old climatically buffeted infertile landscapes, and these young, often disturbed fertile landscapes, and opened up this vision of 250 million years of plant evolution to me in the southwest. So with all of these ideas, I began my residency project in Albany. And then I met Arnie Carroll Peterson. Arnie Carroll arrived with Noel Nanup's map of the songlines of the southwest, and I'd never seen anything like it. I'd heard about the songlines when I was working in Central Australia, but I'd never seen it drawn out like a map like this. And Arnie Carroll said, look, the elders, we're getting old, but we don't want the songlines forgotten. Is there some way that the songlines can be remembered through some kind of public art project or something? And nobody had ever made a request like that to me before. I'd never even credited a public artwork before. And so with that in mind, I started to think about these ideas. Is there a way that we can think about ecological and cultural restoration and express that in an artwork that is also bringing into an awareness a sense of deep ecology and deep time? If you don't understand your deep time history, if you don't understand landscape as a science in which you're looking at ecological restoration as part of our inheritance, then I think we're in big trouble. And so what this artwork is about, what the project is about, is those ideas. Particularly, it was brought home to me when I went out to the Stirling Ranges with Sarah Barrett, and we were looking at the species out there, plant species out there that she was looking to protect. And one of them was Banksia montana, and there was less than 30 individuals left. And I couldn't believe that. 30 individuals. I hadn't even heard about the species before. Wasn't on the news, but less than 30, that's it. And there's so many species like that around Australia. And so my residency ended, and I headed out to Wave Rock for my next residency, and I went through the wheat belt. I saw the documentary that Keith had put together with many people in the region called A Million Acres a Year. And seeing the destruction, something like 7% left of the native vegetation in the wheat belt. When I got to Wave Rock, I always had a thing about having my birthday in interesting geology. So I'd planned for a while to have my birthday on Wave Rock. I was 42 and I climbed up on Wave Rock. I'm something of a fan of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, so I thought 42 was an important number, but I swore there wouldn't be any more artist residencies until I'd found a way of creating the Genestreams project. And the Genestreams project is a way of thinking about the tree of life in which we live our lives through the tree of life. Think of it this way. A gene pool is of the moment. It's like a photograph, but a gene stream is the sum of those gene pools through deep time. It's very important that we keep the gene streams flowing, and that's the message in this sculpture. Each gene stream is unique, and so to think of ourselves as being able to comprehend that and then become custodians of that, that to me is very, very important. But I needed a university to work with to do this. Australian National University funded the project, and we developed as a proof of concept 4 virtual reality simulations that would take people on flights through the Tree of Life, where we could utilize the Tree of Life and deep time as an online learning and teaching tool. So all of our virtual reality work was done. We were going to fund the website, then COVID happened. 290 projects at least in the innovation, online learning and teaching area, so much had to be shut down because the university had lost its students. We didn't get any help from the government, and so that was it for my project. But all through this time, I'd been sending back designs to Keith Bradbury and Arnie Carroll with this idea for a sculpture for the songlines. What could any of these designs work? And none of them were, until one day I was feeling pretty depressed, lost all my funding, I'd lost my team at ANU, and I turned over a coffee table. It was round and it had 3 legs to it, and I thought, there's something about that coffee table. And it sat on my floor for a month until I realised that one of the phylogenetic trees that I'd developed for Mulligan's flat had several time-to-distance ratios. It was one of our Genestreams models. We had one time-to-distance ratio from deep time, many hundreds of millions of years ago, to 1788. Then we had another time-to-distance ratio from 1788 to the present. Then we had another time-to-distance ratio in which to project into future. So through field work, we could create an interplay between field work, bringing it back, putting it into these species that are growing through time. And so I took all of that information, that material, and I infused it into the coffee table. And when I did that, the present day to deep time was placed on a horizontal axis. So this point of over 600 million years ago was the center, and the geological timescale became a sequence of concentric circles. You could stand on it. I realized you could stand on the whole deep time history of shared ancestry. And then the edges would become the totems. Arnie Carroll had spoken to me about totem species. And we could have 15 of them. As you'll see, there's 15 plus 1, the humans. When you enter this sculpture, you represent all of humanity. So Gondwana Link loved it and said, okay, let's do this. They applied for funding, we got the funding, and we went through this big process of working with the Twin Creeks Friends of Porongurups, choosing the species that they wanted to have represented in the sculpture with Andy Carroll, and then we started on the art. The idea of the artwork is that it works 2 ways. You have a deep time story inside the sculpture. So all of your deep time phylogenetic tree, all of that material, all of the information about the species is all in there. I went back to my friend Gary Muir at this time from WOW Wilderness Tours, who I'd worked on in my Valley of Giants residency. And Gary is really responsible for so much of the research on the deep time connections here. I worked with my friend Marley Moyer, scientific illustrator from Melbourne, on the illustrations for the different species that had been selected. And Jenny Wilson had introduced me to a means of dyeing with native plants that to me looked like fossils of the future. So here we have fossils of the past and fossils of the future. It's all inside this sculpture. But on the outside, it's like a flower, which is interesting. I didn't mean for that to happen. Someone said, oh, it's like a flower. It's like a Proteacean flower. And I said, well, how about that? It is. But the idea of the flower is where we talk about cultural restoration, where the traditional owners create the art for the outside of the sculpture. So each part of that has its own story. And Arnie Carroll project managed that part of the work. So when we had all of the artwork from the various contributing artists, we printed it out on the aluminium and we slid it into this shell, which is like a flower, but it's a flower of life, it's a flower of deep time, it's a flower of evolution. And that's why they're called Genestream sculptures. So Genestream Sculptures also has the website, genestreams.online, and that will have all of that online learning and teaching information where you'll hear from the different people that have been involved in setting this up. Bunya Mountains, they want one. We're going to be building one there, and we have many other locations that we're looking at as well. So as Arnie Carroll's vision of connecting or reconnecting the songlines and talking about them in relation to conservation is the vision that we are now aiming to fulfill. Because if you're a culture that's insular, that just exists inside its cities, that doesn't understand its deep time heritage, then you're in trouble. You're in big trouble. I've heard people say those who forget the past that are condemned to repeat it. But those who do not comprehend or understand the deep time history of landscape and environment are also in big trouble with the technologies that we have today. So the Genestream sculptures, as an extension of Genestreams, it's a broader project where we see ourselves as part of this incredible unfolding life that has been growing through space and time for many, many hundreds of millions of years, in fact, billions of years on this planet.
This takes you back in time.
Yeah.
Like a bloody big eggshell, isn't it? Got a rock, that's good.
And along the top of all of it, we have the plate tectonics from 250 million years ago, from the retreat of the glaciers up to near on the present day. So you can follow this deep time story through it, and all of the species line up with the phylogenetic tree that was researched by Gary Muir and myself.
Doesn't it feel like you've got some...
Yeah. In it we have dyed plants that represent the fossils of the future, of our time into the future, and they're combined with fossils of the past that relate to the species that was selected by the traditional owners and the conservation organisation that's operating in Twin Creeks. Part of the tree of life that's growing through space and time, a four-dimensional element of this huge one life, this strange organic mathematics that we're all a part of, and put it into our three-dimensional world, and then say this is something that's about ecological and cultural restoration through connectivity and awareness of that is a very powerful thing, I think. It's a very important thing. And that's what we've worked on, all of us have worked on together. There are some things in this where people will think, oh, there's a kind of jutting bit of rock in this thing. What's this about?
Right, that goes
But
right
actually, after the ice, if you read Peter Ward's book on geology of Western Australia's national parks, he describes the landscape after the ice. If you look at any retreating glacier, the rocks bitten into and things. So part of it, I wanted it to be about this environment, but I also wanted people to be mindful of those landscapes of the ancient past, that this place is connected through its plants and animals.
out now.
Yeah, we can
Walk out.
It's a good size.
It's a really great size. It's a great size.
Getting mosquitoes at the same time.
Yeah, well done, mate.
Yeah.
Seeing that.
What's your trade? What are the skills that...
I'm a glass artist, ex-farmer glass artist. I've built four-wheel drive tractors for my father, and I've built sculptures all around Albany, and Ben saw a sculpture at the Juniper Aged Care Facility, and he came and asked me if I could help him do this, and well, I said, it can't be too hard. I didn't think it was going to take this long. Anyway, we did it. Yeah. Sorry, Mozzie's having a go at me now.
What's taken you into art from farming? What is that?
Well, that's a serious question. It's called a knock on the head. Sorry, but I had a bad prang and couldn't farm anymore. What can I do? I can draw pictures. So I've been doing it for the last 36 years. It's taken 36 years to become an overnight success. But anyway, we got there.
Yeah. Do you think there's something about art as a language? Why art? You could have done all sorts of things.
Because I can draw pictures, mate. Been drawing since I was knee-high to a grasshopper, really. And they told me at school, sure career, I'll never make a living out of art. I might not be, but I'm having a damn good time trying. That's about my story, really. It's taken a fair while to get this way. I wouldn't have imagined that this was what's going to happen when Ben came to me to see if he could help me make it. Knocked my socks off. Can't say much more.
I think, as I said, nobody had ever asked me a question like that before. Could a public artwork of some form be created that could connect the songlines and talk about conservation, ecology, and everything that was being involved in, and what Gondwana Link were doing? And I'd never had.
It was kind of a crazy concept. How could we do this? How could it be done? But I think the simple formula there was the walk trails, the footprints, and just following that story, and everything else evolves from that. All from this, but it's been.
You often talk about the cup of tea.
Oh, look! It started off with Ben was over in Cairns, I think, and I was back in Albany. And we were having a talk, and I started whinging about the federal government spending all that money on the reenactment of Captain Cook. And I was annoyed with it, and I was talking to Ben, that why didn't they honour the first people's footprints? And Ben said, well, how can we do it?
And we'd had that discussion at the Vancouver Arts Centre about when you showed me the map.
Yeah.
About,
how
there could be something could be remembered from this incredible map. And maybe there's a way in the future with communities around Australia who are interested in being involved. Like, we have 3D models. Not every community necessarily has all the funds to have a sculpture like this, but we could create the art, we can create 3D models, we can show that on the Genestreams website. So there's steps towards this, where also you don't just have the artwork, perhaps they could work on their own maps. I would encourage all the communities around Australia to create their own maps of their own songlines and connect it with the public art program that we're working on.
And the buzzword now is reconciliation. People don't know how to do it, but this is what reconciliation's about. It's about doing it and bringing the two science, the old science and Western science, together to have that common interest, common issue to work on. It's been a great journey.
It's been fantastic.
Great. Yes, it's been wonderful. Some crazy times. I'm thinking, what's he talking about? But we managed to bring it together. Yeah, and so, Ben was so far ahead of us in terms of conceptualisation, and I'm still back here trying to work out the logistics of it.
No, you absolutely amazed me with that map of the songlines of the Southwest, to see something like that. So, and then you told me your songline. Yeah. Remember we put your songline together?
Yeah.
It's been a massive learning curve for me. And an awareness unfolds when you start to pay attention that this culture is like deep in the landscape. Yeah. And when you see like things like, if you look off Perth, the water, if you look at Google Earth, you see a giant canyon there.
Yeah.
And then I've heard from Indigenous people saying, we've got songlines that go out there.
That's right.
We've got stories about that.
Yeah, yes.
So the Indigenous people well and truly have experienced massive climate change and massive sea level rise here in Australia. And there is so much to learn, so much, if you just take the time to listen to the wisdom.
One of the stories that I've got is where there was no ocean. The ocean was about 40 k's out from Albany, and the creation of the harbour, when these two snakes started fighting about it, it created the harbour, and the water all flowed in to Albany. And that's a story that resonates all around Australia with just the different kind of elements to it, but it resonates all around Australia. So we knew those stories when the ocean was way out on the continental shelf, and then we know the stories when the water came in.
And one of the really wonderful things about this location that's been chosen is that as you walk in, you represent humanity. You are the representative of humanity within this evolutionary tree, and that lines up perfectly. If you look out to the Stirlings, you can see the sleeping lady.
Mother Earth. Yeah, a wise old lady. I'd love to sort of test that theory.
Yeah, I think you're right on. I think they were well and truly aware that this was something very, very different was happening up in the high peaks, up in the top of the mountain. And so you follow this back. This is getting close up to the point in which the first Indigenous Australians basically walked into Australia. You can see that it hasn't formed the Himalayas.
Yeah.
So it's about to collide up and hit. In this one, India is still in the middle of the Indian Ocean.
Right.
But this one's a little bit closer, and that one's where it's collided to form the Himalayas. But the amazing thing here is that when you think about the Prongrops, they formed in the northern hemisphere.
Wow.
The Sterlings formed way south of here, but the Prongrops were way up in the northern hemisphere, and they crossed the equator in this Ordovician time, travelled all the way down to there, and so this is like, in a way, very roughly you could think of it this way, it's like a kind of bookend Gondwana.
Yeah.
That goes right back to this formation of Gondwana, and this is about the breakup, and within this you've got all these incredible plants and animals.
That time travel. Time travel, well, deep time travel it is, isn't it?
Yeah, well, you can see Kronosaurus.
Yeah.
Kronosaurus, it's called Kronosaurus queenslandicus, was found in Queensland, but it was swimming in this in the inland sea, the Eromanga Sea, during the time of the dinosaurs. And the dinosaurs, they make up a very small bracket of the whole deep time story, but they're very much central to this story.
It's interesting how old that plant is.
And you were saying this is your totem.
But it's your totem.
Yeah.
So I was delighted to see that this plant here, which was painted by Marley Moyer, is part of my totemic system. The plant, we know that when we can cite this plant, we're actually in our family country, and that's when that's no longer cited, we know that we're in another clan group's territory, and we respect that and move back into our own country. But it'd be interesting to see how old that is and how long has my family been connected to that totem, that plant. You follow it, and what is it connected to?
Oh, it takes you way, way back. Yeah.
Yeah.
Eventually, we go back to a shared ancestor of both the animals and the plants.
And the banshee.
But if you follow this phylogenetic tree back, you can follow it back to here we have the neogene. So it connects, if we follow it around, you see how it joins up here. So this is in the neogene. This is still after the time of the extinction of the dinosaurs, but you've got a number of species radiating out in the neogene, and it's also connected up the Banksias as well. So this is telling you a deep time story, and you can see something like the mouse spider here, and the humans goes right back into the Ediacaran period here. But something that goes way further back than that is this connection in deep time between the animals and the plants. But we have things breaking away from the humans in the Devonian period. This is where we find the first footprints of fish-like creatures coming onto land. They break away in the Carboniferous period with much higher oxygen levels than we have today, of spiders the size of your head, dragonflies the size of eagles. Other species break away in the Permian. To find out what it is, you follow it round. In this particular case, it's the echidna breaks away from our ancestry in the Triassic period. After that, in the Jurassic period, the heyday of the dinosaurs, we have further things breaking away. That's the possums, and we have the black-gloved wallaby as well.